My sister's assault put me in the hospital. Parents said obey or be cut off. I spoke anyway. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. My sister's assault put me in the hospital. My parents told me to obey and stay silent, or be cut off, but I refused to stay quiet. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily. I'm 26 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family has lived behind masks. On the outside, we looked like the perfect household. 2 respectable parents, 2 well-dressed daughters, polite smiles at church, friendly waves to the neighbors. But inside our walls, the truth was far from perfect. My parents, Richard and Linda, cared about one thing more than anything else: appearances. They wanted people to believe we were flawless. The truth, however, was that perfection came at my expense. Growing up, I was taught to follow the rules without question. My parents made it clear that my role was to obey and never embarrass them. My little sister Sophie, for years younger than me, lived by a very different set of standards. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, even when she did. Every mistake she made was brushed away with excuses. Every success she claimed was celebrated as though she had carried the whole family on her shoulders. I, on the other hand, was held to impossible standards and reminded daily that I had to work harder, be better, and never cause shame. As kids, Sophie knew how to twist situations, so I ended up in trouble while she walked free. If we fought, I was punished for being the older one who should know better. If she lied, I was scolded for making her feel insecure. Over the years, resentment built quietly inside me, but I kept it hidden. Speaking up wasn't an option. My parents would shut me down with one sentence: don't argue. Families stick together, no matter what. To them, sticking together meant protecting Sophie at any cost, even if it destroyed me. When I reached adulthood, things didn't change. Sophie was praised for every small achievement: passing a test, buying new clothes, getting attention from boys. I was invisible unless I disappointed them, and then suddenly, all eyes were on me. The house felt like a stage where Sophie played the lead role. My parents directed the show, and I was only there to fill the background. Still, I tried to convince myself it was normal. Maybe all families had favorites. Maybe I was being dramatic. But deep down, I knew there was something twisted in the way my parents worshipped Sophie and dismissed me. It wasn't just favoritism, it was control. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, the truth was that their obsession with Sophie's image was going to cost me more than I could ever imagine. Because one night, Sophie crossed a line I never thought she would, and I was the one who paid the price. When I think back to my childhood, the first thing that comes to mind is control. My parents had rules for everything: how we dressed, how we spoke, how we behaved in front of others. Nothing was ever about what we wanted. It was always about what would make my parents look respectable. They used phrases like "don't talk back" or "do as you're told," until those words were burned into my mind. It didn't matter if something was unfair or if I was hurt. My voice was never important. Sophie, on the other hand, figured out early how to bend that system to her advantage. She knew exactly how to smile at the right time, how to cry when it suited her, and how to shift blame onto me if she needed an escape. If something went missing in the house, Sophie would look at me with wide eyes and say, "Emily must have taken it." My parents would accept her word instantly. If she caused a problem at school, she'd claim I pressured her into it, and they believed her without hesitation. Watching her twist every situation was exhausting, but I stayed quiet. I told myself maybe protecting her would someday mean she'd protect me too. Deep down, though, I carried resentment. I wanted my parents to see through her act, to realize I wasn't the enemy. Still, I couldn't stop myself from stepping in when she needed help. If she got into a mess she couldn't talk her way out of, I'd step forward and take part of the blame just to keep peace at home. I thought maybe, just maybe, sacrificing myself would earn me their approval. Years later, when I started dating Mark, everything shifted. Mark wasn't like anyone my family knew. He was gentle, supportive, and always encouraged me to speak my mind. For the first time, I felt like my thoughts mattered to someone. He'd ask me what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, and what dreams I had. It felt like breathing fresh air after being stuck in a locked room for years. But my parents never saw him that way. To them, Mark was a threat. They said he wasn't ambitious enough, that his background wasn't impressive, and that I was settling. What they really meant was that he gave me confidence, and confidence was dangerous in their eyes. My father once told me straight out, "You don't need a man distracting you from your duty to this family." My mother chimed in with, "If you waste your time with him, you'll regret it." It was clear they didn't want me building a life outside their control. The more Mark supported me, the more my parents pushed back. Every visit turned into an argument, every phone call filled with criticism. They wanted me to stay in the role they had written for me, quiet, obedient, and completely under their command. What they didn't realize was that meeting Mark was the beginning of me questioning everything I had been taught to accept. The breaking point came during a family gathering. My parents had invited relatives and neighbors, the kind of night where everything had to appear flawless. I tried to keep to myself, helping in the kitchen and making sure everything stayed calm. Sophie, however, was already drinking too much. She loved the attention, laughing loudly, telling stories that made her sound more important than she really was. At first, I ignored her comments, but as the night went on, her words cut deeper. At the table, in front of everyone, she suddenly turned to me and said, "Emily's only here because she can't do anything better with her life." The laughter that followed stung more than I wanted to admit. I felt my face grow hot, but I stayed quiet. My parents didn't step in to correct her. Instead, they smiled awkwardly, as if pretending nothing happened. Mark, who was by my side, squeezed my hand under the table, silently urging me not to respond. But Sophie wasn't finished. Later, after most guests had left, she cornered me in the hallway. Her voice was sharp, her breath heavy with alcohol. She mocked me again, throwing cruel words about how I would never be enough. I finally snapped and told her she had no right to speak to me that way. What started as words turned into shouting. I thought it would end there, but Sophie's anger boiled over. In a sudden burst, she shoved me hard. My foot slipped on the staircase, and before I could catch myself, I was falling. The sharp pain of wood against my body, the crash, the breath knocked out of me, it all blurred together. The last thing I remember before blacking out was Sophie's face, wide-eyed and frozen. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Pain shot through my side every time I tried to move. The doctor explained I had broken ribs and a concussion. My head throbbed, but worse than the physical pain was the memory of how I ended up there. I expected my parents to arrive worried, maybe even shocked. Instead, their faces were cold. My father stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. My mother leaned against the wall, her expression hard. The first words out of my father's mouth were not about my injury. He said, "You will not accuse your sister of anything. Do you understand?" I couldn't believe it. I tried to speak, but my mother cut me off. "You'll forgive Sophie. You'll tell people it was an accident. If you don't, you're out of this family." In that moment, lying broken in the hospital bed, I realized my pain meant nothing to them. Their only concern was protecting Sophie's reputation. My parents had made their choice clear. It was Sophie above all else, no matter what it cost me. Lying in that hospital bed, I kept waiting for some kind of softness from my parents, but it never came. Instead of asking how I was feeling or if I was in pain, they acted as if I had created the problem. My father leaned close to me, his voice sharp and low, and said, "You will not embarrass this family. If you talk to anyone about Sophie, if you try to press charges, you are no longer our daughter." His words landed heavier than the injuries I was already carrying. I tried to argue, but every time I opened my mouth, my mother shut me down. She said Sophie had just been drinking too much, that it wasn't really her fault, that accidents happen. She didn't call it what it truly was, violent. To my parents, protecting Sophie's image mattered more than protecting. Later that evening, Sophie came into the room. Her eyes were red, tears streaming down her face, and she clutched my hand as if she were the victim. "I didn't mean it, Emily. You know I would never hurt you like that," she whispered, her voice trembling. She looked so convincing that for a moment, if I hadn't been the one lying there in pain, even I might have believed her. My parents rushed to her side, comforting her, telling her not to be so hard on herself. My mother stroked Sophie's hair and whispered, "You're just under stress, sweetheart. Your sister understands." It was as if I was invisible in that room, as if my broken ribs and pounding head didn't matter. The betrayal hit me in waves. Sophie had put me here, and instead of holding her accountable, my parents wrapped her in sympathy. Mark was the only one who saw through it. He stayed close, holding my hand, his jaw tight with anger. After my parents left the room, he leaned over and said quietly, "You can't let them do this to you. You need to stand up for yourself, Emily. This isn't right." His voice was firm but filled with concern. I wanted to believe I could. I wanted to think I had the strength to call out what Sophie did and demand justice. But the reality was heavier. My parents had made it clear. If I spoke, I'd lose everything. They would cut me off, disown me, and I'd be on my own. After a lifetime of being taught that family was all I had, that threat carried real weight. I lay awake most nights in that hospital, torn between two impossible choices: stay silent and protect Sophie, or speak up and risk losing the only family I had ever known. The pressure wrapped around me like chains, and no matter which way I turned, I couldn't see a way out. A few days after the hospital incident, I was trying to rest when I overheard my parents talking quietly in the next room. At first, I didn't want to listen, but the urgency in their voices drew me in. I heard my father say, "If this gets out, Sophie's engagement to Brandon could fall apart. She can't afford a scandal." My mother responded, her tone sharp and commanding, "We have to make sure she looks innocent. Emily has to say it was just an accident. No one can know the truth." I froze. Hearing them discuss me like a tool to protect Sophie's reputation made my stomach turn. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was manipulation at its darkest. My parents were willing to sacrifice my well-being, my safety, and my honesty just to make sure Sophie's future stayed perfect. My broken ribs, my concussion, my fear, all of it was irrelevant to them. They made it clear that I was expected to lie to the doctors, to relatives, to anyone who asked. I was supposed to smile, nod, and pretend nothing had happened. If I refused, I would be cut off completely. My parents didn't see me as their daughter in pain. I was an obstacle, a threat to the image they wanted to present to the world. For hours, I replayed the words in my mind. I felt a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just Sophie who had harmed me. It was the people who were supposed to protect me, who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Their priority was always Sophie, even if it meant ignoring the truth and hurting me in the process. That night, lying in bed with my side throbbing and my head pounding, I felt the pressure crushing me. For the first time, the weight of my silence became unbearable. I realized that staying quiet wasn't helping anyone. It was only allowing them to control me. The idea of being treated as disposable, used to shield my sister from consequences, sparked something inside me. I began thinking clearly, planning quietly. I knew speaking up would change everything. It would anger my parents, shock my relatives, and shatter the family image they worked so hard to maintain. But staying silent meant losing myself entirely. For the first time, I made a decision. I wouldn't let my pain be ignored, and I wouldn't let them use me to protect someone else. I would find a way to stand up, to make the truth hurt. Even if it meant losing their approval, even if it meant walking away from the life I had known, I refused to be silent any longer. That night, the seed of resistance was planted. I didn't yet know exactly how I would act, but I knew that from that moment on, things could never go back to the way they were. I was done being the one they sacrificed for Sophie's perfect life. A week after the fall, I had a follow-up visit at the hospital. My ribs still ached, and every movement sent sharp pain through my side. The doctor came in, notebook in hand, and asked gently, "Emily, can you tell me again how this happened?" I felt my throat tighten. For days, I had rehearsed answers in my mind, every lie my parents had demanded ready on my lips. I thought about Sophie's innocent act, the tears she had faked, the way my parents had pressured me to stay silent. But something inside me shifted that day. I hesitated, my heart pounding, but then I saw Mark sitting quietly beside me. His hand on mine was steady, calm. He gave me a small nod, like he was telling me it was okay to speak. And for the first time since the accident, I let the truth come out. "My sister pushed me," I said, my voice low but firm. The words felt heavy but freeing at the same time. Saying it aloud, admitting it, felt like taking a small piece of myself back from the control my family had tried to hold over me. The moment I spoke, I realized something. The truth has power. It began to spread quietly at first. Nurses who overheard my story mentioned it to others. Extended family members started asking questions, some with sympathy, some with confusion. Whispers of what really happened traveled fast, and I could feel the tension growing. People who had only seen Sophie as perfect began to hesitate, unsure what to believe. When my parents found out that I had told the truth to the doctor, they were furious. My father's face turned red, and my mother's hands trembled slightly as they stood over me at home. "You've ruined everything," my father shouted. "You've betrayed your own sister." My mother added, her voice sharp. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The shame, the humiliation. This is your fault." I could feel my body tense, ready to shrink back as I had done so many times before. But this time I didn't. I looked at them calmly, my voice steady despite the fear and the pain. "No," I said firmly. "You all betrayed me." The silence that followed was heavy, but it felt right. For the first time, I was no longer the scared girl they could manipulate. I wasn't hiding my injuries or my pain for their comfort. I had spoken, and the truth was mine, not theirs to control. That moment marked a turning point. I understood that standing up for myself wasn't just about proving who was right. It was about reclaiming my life from the people who had tried to erase me. My words, small as they were, had already started to change everything around me, and I felt a strength I hadn't known I had before. From that day forward, I knew I could no longer let fear dictate my choices. I had spoken, and there was no going back. A few days after I spoke the truth to the doctor, news of the incident reached Sophie's fiancé, Brandon. I hadn't told him myself, but as the whispers spread through family, he confronted Sophie directly. I wasn't in the room, but I could imagine the scene clearly, her eyes wide, panic rising, stumbling over her words. She tried to play innocent, saying it was an accident, that I had fallen on my own. But Brandon didn't look convinced. Later, Brandon approached me privately. I could see the concern in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He asked me, without a hint of accusation, "Emily, did Sophie really push you?" I took a deep breath and nodded. My voice was steady as I said, "Yes, she did." There was no anger in my words, no bitterness. Just the truth, simple and unflinching. Brandon was silent for a moment, processing the information. Then he made a decision. The wedding would be postponed. He told Sophie she needed to get therapy, to confront her behavior, and take responsibility for what she had done, before they could even consider going forward. For the first time, someone outside my immediate family saw that Sophie's actions had consequences. When my parents learned of Brandon's decision, their anger was immediate and intense. They turned on me, accusing me of destroying Sophie's happiness. "You've ruined her entire future," my mother screamed, her face flushed with fury. My father added, "If you hadn't spoken, none of this would have happened. You're selfish and cruel." I wanted to argue, to make them understand that I hadn't ruined anything, that the truth was the only thing standing between Sophie and real consequence, but I realized it was pointless. They weren't listening to me. They were only focused on protecting their perfect image of Sophie. The tension at home became unbearable. Every meal was silent except for sharp remarks. Every glance a reminder that I no longer had their approval. I couldn't stay there anymore. Mark helped me pack my things, offering steady hands and words of reassurance. Moving out was terrifying at first, but I could feel the weight lifting as I stepped into my own space, even if it was small and simple. For the first time, I was free from the suffocating control of my parents' expectations. I didn't need their approval to exist, and I didn't need to live under constant fear of being manipulated or silenced. Being with Mark reminded me that I wasn't alone. I had someone who valued me for who I was, not who I was supposed to be. Leaving wasn't just a physical move, it was emotional liberation. I could finally think for myself, breathe without tension, and begin to rebuild my life on my terms. Sophie's actions had hurt me, and my parents' reaction had confirmed I couldn't rely on them. But stepping away allowed me to start taking care of myself, and for the first time, that felt like a victory. After moving out, I realized that I didn't need to fight or argue to get justice. I didn't have to yell at Sophie, confront her publicly, or try to shame her. The truth had a way of working on its own. I focused on living my life honestly, taking care of myself, and letting my actions speak for me. Every day I spent building a new routine, enjoying small freedoms, and pursuing things I had been denied for years felt like a quiet kind of revenge. Meanwhile, Sophie's carefully constructed image began to unravel. Family members who had once defended her without question started to notice inconsistencies in her stories. Whispers spread about her behavior and the accident, and suddenly people who had admired her began to doubt her. Friends and relatives started asking questions, and Sophie's charm no longer seemed convincing. The perfect facade she had relied on for so long was cracking under the weight of truth. Brandon's patience ran out as the truth became impossible to ignore. One day, he sat Sophie down and told her bluntly that he couldn't continue with the engagement. "I can't marry someone who hides violence, who refuses to take responsibility for their actions," he said. His words were final, and Sophie had no choice but to accept them. The wedding she had dreamed of for so long would never happen. My parents, predictably, blamed me for every consequence. They accused me of ruining Sophie's life, destroying her happiness, and creating drama that reflected poorly on the family. They doubled down on their punishment, cutting me off completely. Financial support, emotional connection, approval, all were gone. But instead of feeling despair, I felt something I had never felt in my life: freedom. For the first time, I could live without fear of judgment, manipulation, or control. I could make decisions for myself, follow my own instincts, and define who I wanted to be. Every step I took away from my parents' influence, every choice I made without consulting them, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost for years. I watched from a distance as Sophie faced the consequences of her actions. She had power, support, and opportunities, but none of it mattered without honesty and trust. Seeing her struggle without having to lift a finger or plot revenge felt more satisfying than any confrontation could have. The truth alone had done what I couldn't have done with words or anger. In that quiet way, life shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I was building a life on my terms, free from manipulation, deceit, and favoritism. For the first time, I understood that true strength didn't come from fighting someone else. It came from living honestly, embracing the truth, and letting it guide the world around you. And in that, I finally found peace. After the chaos with Sophie and my parents, I knew I had to focus on myself. Recovery wasn't just about healing my broken ribs or letting my concussion fade. It was about regaining my sense of self. Every day was a step forward, sometimes small, sometimes painful, but each one reminded me that I was capable of taking care of myself. I allowed myself to feel the anger, the hurt, and the sadness, but I refused to let those feelings define me. Mark was by my side through it all. He helped me adjust to life outside my parents' control, reminding me that I didn't have to face this alone. With his encouragement, I returned to work, reclaiming the routine I had put aside while living under the constant pressure at home. Going back to the office felt like reclaiming a part of my life that had been denied to me for years. I could focus on tasks, build projects, and interact with colleagues without the weight of constant judgment pressing on my shoulder. Finding a place to live on my own was another challenge, but one I was determined to meet. I rented a small apartment, not extravagant, but peaceful. It became a sanctuary, a space where I could breathe freely, think clearly, and make decisions without anyone controlling me. Even simple things like arranging furniture, cooking meals, or choosing my daily routine felt empowering. For the first time, I understood what independence truly meant. One of the most surprising parts of this period was reconnecting with extended family. Some relatives had initially sided with Sophie, believing the polished image she presented. But as the truth surfaced, they began to reach out quietly, expressing concern, checking on my well-being, and in some cases apologizing for doubting me. Their acknowledgement wasn't about revenge or drama. It was simply recognition of the reality I had lived through. Through all of this, I realized that speaking the truth had given me more than just validation. It had given me power. Power to make my own choices, power to define my life, power to protect myself and my future. I didn't need my parents' approval or Sophie's manipulation to feel worthy. I didn't need their validation to exist with dignity. Every day I spent living my life on my own terms reinforced that strength. I began to dream again, plan for the future, and focus on personal growth. I explored hobbies I had put aside, spent time with people who genuinely cared about me, and built routines that nurtured my mind and body. The wounds from the past didn't disappear overnight, but they no longer held me hostage. In the quiet moments, I felt a deep sense of clarity. I understood that survival wasn't just about getting through pain. It was about reclaiming yourself from those who tried to diminish you. By standing up, by telling the truth, and by moving forward, I had found my voice and my strength. And that realization became the foundation for the life I was determined to build. Months after everything had settled, Sophie reached out. I received a message from her that seemed carefully worded, filled with apologies and claims that she missed me, that she wanted to make things right. But I could see through it. Her timing, her tone, and the way she framed her words made it clear she wasn't reaching out because she cared about me. She was worried about what everyone else thought. She wanted to protect her reputation, not repair the damage she caused. I read her message once, then closed my phone. I didn't respond. I didn't need to explain myself or justify my actions. I had already faced the truth, stood my ground, and rebuilt my life. I realized that engaging with her would only give her another chance to manipulate me, to pull me back into a cycle I had already fought to leave behind. When I think about my family now, I don't feel the same longing I once did. Yes, I lost a connection with my parents and with Sophie. Yes, it hurt deeply, but losing them also allowed me to find something I never had before. Myself. I could live my life honestly, without fear of judgment or control. I could make decisions based on what I wanted, not what others demanded. The freedom I felt was worth far more than maintaining appearances or pretending everything was fine. I told myself quietly, I may have lost a family, but I found myself. That's worth more than keeping lies alive. Those words became my anchor. They reminded me every day that my value didn't depend on my parents' approval or Sophie's lie. My happiness didn't rely on keeping secrets or sacrificing my well-being for someone else's comfort. The lesson I carry with me is simple but powerful. Family betrayal can cut deeper than anything else because it challenges the people who are supposed to love and protect you. It can make you doubt yourself and question your worth. But silence, staying quiet to protect others or to avoid conflict, is its own prison. It traps you in fear, guilt, and manipulation, keeping you from living fully. By choosing to speak my truth, I set myself free. I reclaimed my voice, my independence, and my power. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean confrontation or revenge. It can mean simply refusing to be silent, refusing to let others control your story, and choosing a life that honors your own experiences. If anyone listening has ever been told to keep quiet about pain, abuse, or betrayal, I want you to hear this. Don't. Your truth matters. Your voice matters. Speaking up doesn't just expose wrongdoing. It gives you back the control that was taken from you. It allows you to live fully, with dignity and strength, even if the people you thought you could count on fail you. Freedom begins with honesty, and it starts with you.